She was judged and dismissed the very second her worn leather boot crossed the threshold, a simple, oatmeal-colored linen dress creased from the city transit. Scuffed boots that spoke of miles walked on unforgiving pavement. Hair the color of rich chestnuts, falling in untamed waves down her back, utterly devoid of product or pretense. An actress, draped in emerald silk, turned to her companion and whispered, the sound sharp enough to cut through the room's polite hum. Seriously, showing up to the Elysian casting, looking like a charity case. Then, she walked toward the heart of the room, and the silent judgment of the crowd became a palpable force, as oppressive as the city heat outside. This was the final casting call for Elysian's global legacy campaign. Elysian, an iconic fragrance house making its first major comeback in over a decade, was not merely selling a perfume, they were selling an ideal. The campaign was being helmed by Julian Thorne, a director whose name was spoken in tones of both reverence and terror, a man with a reputation for merciless perfectionism and a shelf full of awards to justify it. The theme was nobility, not the kind born of titles and tiaras, but something more profound, more eternal. The casting was held on the penthouse floor of the Elysian Corporation's gleaming glass and steel tower, a modern spire piercing the Manhattan skyline. Only 30 actresses had received the coveted invitation, each one meticulously selected from a pool of thousands across the nation. These women were the industry's elite, award winners, social media titans, the daughters of cinematic royalty. They were, in a word, untouchable. Lena Vance, however, did not belong. Or so every glittering, judgmental eye in the room seemed to agree. She was a nobody. No entourage, no stylist, no publicist whispering in her ear. There was only her wrinkled dress, her manager, Marianne Croft, who was clinging to a gut instinct that defied all logic, and a quiet power concealed behind her calm, hazel eyes, a secret that was about to shatter every preconceived notion in this room. Following Marianne into the reception area, Lena almost squinted. The light pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows was blinding, reflecting off the polished Carrara marble floors and the diamond-encrusted jewelry adorning nearly every woman present. The room was a dazzling, dangerous sea of A-listers. The theme was legacy, and they had interpreted it as an excuse for unrestrained opulence. Designer gowns and jewel tones swept the floor. Priceless necklaces glittered under the recessed lighting, and perfectly coiffed hair was sculpted into works of art. The air was thick, with the scent of a dozen different expensive perfumes, all competing for dominance. Most of the crowd moved with a polished ease, exchanging air kisses and business cards with the fluid grace of seasoned predators. The newcomers, the few who, like Lena, were not yet household names, orbited the bigger stars, their smiles desperate and their compliments effusive, hoping a little bit of starlight might rub off on them. When Lena appeared in the doorway, a sudden, heavy silence fell over the room. You could have heard a diamond earring drop onto the marble. The silence wasn't born of awe or recognition. No one knew her name. It was born of sheer, unadulterated shock. Compared to the glittering constellations of fame dripping in couture, she looked wildly, offensively out of place. Some might have called her appearance simple. Others, in this context, would call it an act of professional suicide. Her dress was a plain, slightly faded linen shift, the kind one might wear to a farmer's market, not a career-defining audition. Her brown leather boots were worn and scuffed at the toes. She wore no jewelry save for a simple, thin band on her finger, and her face was a clean canvas, free of foundation, mascara, or lipstick. Her chestnut hair hung in loose, natural waves, a stark contrast to the lacquered updos and sleek bobs surrounding her. The room was packed with Hollywood's elite, and after a moment of stunned, collective blinking, they didn't bother to hide their disdain. They didn't even lower their voices. The whispers started as a low hiss and quickly grew into a chorus of ridicule, tearing into her right in front of her face. "Who is that?" One actress with surgically perfected features sneered to her friend. "She looks like she just crawled out of a subway grate." Did she get lost on her way to a folk music festival?" Another chimed in, eliciting a cruel titter from her circle. "No, wait." A third voice cut in, sharp with recognition, but not for Lena. "She's with Marianne Croft. You know, the manager who used to represent that starlet who imploded a few years back." Everyone knew Marianne. She had been a golden manager, the woman who had guided a fiery young actress to superstardom before that client abruptly, and very publicly, retired from the industry, leaving Marianne's career in a precarious position. Seeing her now, standing beside the plainly dressed Lena, sparked a fresh wave of disbelief and derision. Wait, that's Marianne's new client? The hidden gem she's been hyping up? A well-known producer scoffed, shaking his head. Even with her last star gone, Marianne's resume shouldn't have her stooping this low. It's embarrassing. Is Croft's agency that broke? Another quipped. They can't even afford a stylist from a department store? Nah, they're not broke, someone else corrected, their voice dripping with condescension. They just clearly don't care about this one. Look at her, it's a throwaway. The whispers turned vicious, aimed as much at Marianne as they were at Lena. They saw a fallen kingmaker, and the sharks began to circle. At that moment, Sloane Covington, the undisputed queen of the room and a rising star from a rival agency, sauntered over. She moved like a panther, her emerald silk gown rustling softly with each step. A syrupy, insincere smile was painted on her perfect lips, a smile that barely hid the mockery in her eyes. "Marianne, darling," she purred, her gaze raking over Lena's simple dress with theatrical pity. "You brought your new talent to the casting?" Marianne's expression remained cool, a mask of professionalism she had perfected over decades in the business. "Sloane, yes, this is Lena Vance. She passed the preliminary rounds, so I figured it would be good experience for her." Her tone was humble but firm, a subtle flex that, despite appearances, Lena had earned her place here among the country's top actresses. Sloane's patronizing smile widened as she studied Lena, shaking her head as if examining a curious but pathetic creature. "Marianne, no offense, but even a waitress wouldn't show up for a job interview looking like this. Did your last client's spectacular flameout hit you that hard? If you're struggling, you should really ditch this sinking ship of an agency and come work for me. My assistant's salary isn't much, but I assure you, it's better than babysitting her." The rivalry between Sloane's agency and Marianne's was legendary. Sloane held a personal grudge. Marianne's former star had outshone her at award shows one too many times. She wasn't about to miss this golden opportunity to twist the knife. The crowd around them smirked, eagerly lapping up the drama. Someone else, emboldened by Sloane's cruelty, piped up, "Hey, my production company is hiring assistants too, Marianne. Are you interested?" Sloane laughed, a sound that was bright and clear but utterly devoid of warmth. "Wow, Marianne, suddenly you're in demand. No need to worry about starving after all." Lena's eyes, which had been placid, flickered with a cold, dangerous glint as Sloane humiliated Marianne. But her manager had given her one strict instruction before they entered. No matter what happens, no matter what they say, you keep your mouth shut. You save it for the room. So Lena did. She turned away from the confrontation, found a quiet, unoccupied chair in a corner, and sat down. She closed her eyes, her posture relaxed, and consciously began to tune out the noise. The cacophony of judgment, the venomous whispers, the arrogant laughter, it all faded into a distant hum. She wasn't here to bicker. She wasn't here to impress them with words or clothes. She was here to find a feeling, a truth, the essence of the role she was about to fight for. She breathed in and then out, building a fortress of calm around herself, brick by silent brick. The auditions began soon after. Lena had drawn a decent number, 15 out of 30. Sloane, who was number 14, glanced at Lena's number card and sighed dramatically, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Such a good slot, completely wasted on her. The first actress went in. She was a powerhouse, a self-made star who had clawed her way to the top with raw talent and sheer grit. The room tensed as she entered. Her ability was undeniable. Sloane, however, simply rolled her eyes. "Please," she muttered. "She's just a high school dropout from some backwater town. How is she supposed to embody nobility?" Sloane wasn't exactly an acting prodigy herself, but her family was practically American royalty. Her father was a senator. Her mother owned a luxury fashion line specializing in exotic leathers. She had been raised with elite etiquette tutors, learning piano, calligraphy, and dressage before she learned long division. Today, She wore a vintage gown that likely cost more than Elysian's entire catering budget for the event, and her confidence was a radiant, impenetrable shield. No one here could match her pedigree, even if some of them rivaled her fame. Less than a minute later, the first actress emerged, her face ashen. Her manager rushed to her side, but she just shook her head, defeated. Her manager's shoulders slumped, though she stayed to comfort her as they found a seat in the corner. Sloane crossed her arms, a smug, satisfied look on her face. Knew it. What does a small-town girl know about legacy? Other actresses with similar trust fund backgrounds echoed her sentiment, sneering as the defeated actress, unable to bear the mocking stares, bolted from the room in tears. From her corner, Lena cracked her eyes open just a sliver, watching the woman's retreating figure with a flicker of empathy. It was a shame. The woman's acting chops and dedicated fan base should have made this campaign a lock for her. But Julian Thorne was clearly looking for something else. The second actress, a socialite whose father had bankrolled her entire career, flopped even harder, emerging after 30 seconds. The third, a nepo baby with two famous actor parents, lasted a respectable 3 minutes, but still emerged with a no. As actress after actress cycled through, even the biggest names in the room crumbled under the pressure. The atmosphere grew heavy with nerves and the metallic taste of fear. The anxiety was made worse by the fact that the director, Julian Thorne, could be heard ripping into them from behind the closed door, his voice a low, terrifying roar. His accent was American, but it carried a sharp, biting edge, honed from years of working in the European art house scene. Do they even comprehend the English language? I'm starting to question their basic intelligence. His voice boomed, muffled but clear. I need nobility. I need elegance, not soulless mannequins twirling in a music box. He tore into the first actress. She acts well enough, but her eyes betray her. Too common. There is no history there. On another, a walking coat rack, tacky as hell. Get her out. And a third, she's talented, yes, but she's no goddess. She is not the moon I envisioned for this campaign. And the one right before Sloane, number 13. Does she think I'm an idiot? She knows nothing about the harp she tried to play. It was an insult to the instrument and to my time. The actresses waiting outside, once so brimming with arrogance, paled. The whispers changed from mockery to fear. Is this guy for real? He's trashed every single person, one muttered. He has a chip on his shoulder about American actors, another grumbled. It's just a perfume ad. Why is he acting like we need to be world-renowned experts on everything? Does he expect us to master every classical art form? Sloane scoffed, tossing her perfectly styled blonde hair over her shoulder. Only people with no talent make excuses and blame the director. With a final, withering glance at Lena, she straightened her gown and strutted into the casting room as number 14. Her time had come. When Sloane Covington pushed open the heavy oak door, Julian Thorne's perpetually scowling face softened, the deep lines of irritation around his eyes easing for the first time that day. She was a curated vision, draped in vintage emerald silk that shimmered under the studio lights. Her blonde hair was swept into an elegant chignon, secured by a single, exquisite jade hairpin. Pearls gleamed at her throat. She wasn't just dressed for the part, she was embodying a very specific, very expensive version of it. She was American glamour personified, with a calculated nod to timeless sophistication. Julian's eyes, which had been dull with disappointment, lit up with a flicker of professional interest. His tone, previously a serrated blade, warmed considerably. Ah, come closer, my dear. Let me see you. Sloane glided into the room, her confidence, an invisible, fragrant aura. She stood confidently under his appraisal, her posture perfect, her smile practiced but dazzling. Raised in the most elite circles, her every gesture, the gentle incline of her head, the graceful curve of her wrist oozed a natural, effortless grace. For her, this wasn't acting. This was simply being. Julian circled her slowly, like a hawk studying its prey, nodding to himself. All right, Sloane, the room is yours. Show me what legacy means to you. The vast casting room was a treasure trove of artistic props, a deliberate test set by Julian. A gleaming grand piano stood in one corner, a delicate calligraphy set on a rosewood desk in another. There was a chessboard with hand-carved ivory pieces, an embroidery stand with a half-finished silk tapestry, and a beautiful, intimidating concert harp. Sloane's gaze swept over the objects with the cool assessment of a connoisseur. Her eyes settled on the grand piano. It was the most obvious choice, the most classic. "This one," she said, her voice smooth as cream. She settled onto the bench, her silk dress pooling around her. Without a moment of hesitation, her fingers descended upon the keys. She played a complex Chopin nocturne. The performance was, in a word, flawless. Her fingers danced over the ivory and ebony, each note struck with crystalline precision. The melody filled the room, a technically perfect cascade of sound, intricate and impressive. It was the kind of performance that demanded applause, the kind that ticked every box on a judge's scorecard. Julian listened intently, his expression unreadable. The music was beautiful, yes, but it was a cold beauty. It was the sterile perfection of a museum piece, something to be admired from behind a velvet rope but never truly felt. Her playing had technical brilliance, but it lacked a soul. It spoke of years of expensive lessons and relentless practice, but it told no story. When the final, perfect chord faded into silence, Julian didn't erupt in praise, nor did he dismiss her outright a first for the day. He stood in thoughtful silence for what felt like an eternity before conferring in a low murmur with his assistant. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken deliberation. Finally, the assistant approached Sloane, his face a polite, neutral mask. "Miss Covington," he began, his voice respectful. "We are, of course, still auditioning the remaining candidates. However, Mr. Thorne would be grateful if you would wait outside. We will let you know when a final decision has been made." And the subtext was as clear as the diamonds on Sloane's wrist. They liked her, they were deeply impressed, but they weren't quite ready to call it. Inside, however, Sloane smirked. This was a mere formality. She had seen the look in Julian's eyes. Who could possibly top that? The role was hers to lose. "Of course," she said graciously, rising from the piano bench with a queenly nod. "Thank you for the opportunity." When Sloane stepped back into the waiting area, a palpable shift occurred. The room, which had been thick with anxiety, now buzzed with a new energy, envy. She had been in there for nearly 10 minutes, and instead of Julian's customary shouting, they had heard the ethereal, impressive notes of Chopin. More telling, she wasn't slinking away in defeat like all the others. She calmly took a seat in a prominent chair, poised and serene, ready to be called back in to sign the contract. It was obvious to everyone that she had made the short list. In all likelihood, she had already clinched it. The confidence of the remaining big-name actresses wavered. The Elysian contract was one of the most lucrative of the year, a career-redefining opportunity, but the risk of profound humiliation at the hands of Julian Thorne was immense. Was it worth it? Especially now that a clear frontrunner had emerged. "Number 15, the assistant called out, his voice echoing slightly in the tense room. "You're up." End of trapped. All eyes scanned the room, looking for number 15. They found her in the corner. Lena Vance, still lost in her own world, eyes closed. She didn't budge. Marianne, sitting beside her, made no move to push her. She knew Lena needed this moment, this final breath of stillness before walking into the storm. Sloane, basking in the glow of her perceived victory, saw Lena in her corner and couldn't resist one final, public display of dominance. She rose and glided over to Marianne, her voice dripping with false concern. "Marianne," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm not trying to be mean, truly, but you have to see this from an objective standpoint. Why did you pick her? My old agency dropped her for a reason. You can't seriously be letting her audition for Julian Thorne looking like that, can you?" She gestured vaguely at Lena's simple dress. "When she tanks, and she will tank, it's not just her reputation on the line. It's your entire agency that will look like a joke. A pathetic, desperate joke." Her cruel words drew every eye in the room to Lena, who remained as still as a statue. A few of the other actresses chuckled, relieved to have the spotlight of potential failure shifted onto someone else. With Lena as the designated punching bag, perhaps their own less-than-perfect auditions wouldn't look so bad next to Sloane's triumph. A few, however, stayed quiet, a flicker of doubt in their eyes. They wondered if Lena's ragged appearance was a deliberate move, some kind of avant-garde strategy they were too conventional to understand. Perhaps she would undergo a magical transformation just before entering the room. Just as the assistant was about to call her name again, Lena's eyes opened. They were clear, calm, and held a depth that was almost startling. She turned her head slightly and spoke, her voice soft but steady. "Marianne, I'm ready." Marianne gave her a small, reassuring nod. "You've got this." "Number 15. Let's go," the assistant repeated, his patience wearing thin. Under a crushing sea of skeptical stares and pitying glances, Lena stood. She took a moment to smooth the wrinkles from her simple linen dress, a small, quiet act of self-possession. Then, with her back straight and her head held high, she walked calmly toward the casting room. She didn't rush, nor did she hesitate. She simply walked, each step even and sure. The second the heavy door disappeared behind her, the hushed chatter exploded into open conversation. "Is she actually going in looking like that?" one actress gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in mock horror. "I thought for sure she had some trick up her sleeve, some stunning outfit she was hiding," said another. "But she's really auditioning for the Legacy campaign dressed like a hobo. My God." Sloane took a delicate sip of the sparkling water her own assistant had handed her, a triumphant, cat-like grin playing on her lips. "Ignorance is bliss, I suppose. Why bother trying when you know you'll just crash and burn? Some people just love hoping for a miracle." And then, right on cue, the miracle failed to materialize. Instead, Julian Thorne's voice roared through the door, louder and more furious than it had been all day. "My God, are you insulting me? Are you insulting the legacy of Elysian itself? Get out! Get out!" Inside the casting room, Julian Thorne's fury was a physical entity. It filled the vast, sterile space, sucking the very air from it. His face was a mask of thunder, his voice a low growl that vibrated through the polished floorboards. He felt profoundly, personally insulted. For weeks, he had endured a parade of beautiful empty vessels, actresses who mistook price tags for passion and poise for substance. But this was a new level of disrespect. "Do you have any idea where you are?" he spat, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists at his sides. "This is Elysian, 2 centuries of artistry, of legacy. And you walk in here looking like you have utter contempt for everything we are trying to achieve. I told you to get out. Are you deaf?" He pointed a rigid, trembling finger toward the door, his eyes blazing with a righteous fire. He expected her to flinch, to stammer an apology, to scurry away in tears like so many had before her. But Lena Vance did none of those things. She stood as an uncharted island of calm in his storm. Her clear hazel eyes met his, and in their depths there was no fear, no defiance, not even a hint of apology. There was only a quiet, unnerving focus. Something about her unyielding gaze made him feel out of place, as if his rage was a clumsy, brutish thing in the face of her profound stillness. As his tirade continued, a stream of venom about professionalism and respect, Lena began to move, but she did not move toward the door he was pointing at. Instead, with a slow, almost dreamlike grace, she drifted toward the gleaming grand piano where Sloane had performed her flawless, soulless nocturne. Her fingers, long and elegant, hovered over the keys. Julian's temper, already at its peak, flared into a white-hot nova. "Don't you dare touch that!" he roared, taking a step toward her. "After the display I just witnessed from Miss Covington, the last thing I need is another amateur embarrassing herself and insulting my intelligence." But his words were swallowed by sound, not a hesitant plinking, but a cascade of notes that stopped him cold. The melody that flowed from her fingertips was nothing like Sloane's Chopin. It wasn't classical, it wasn't polished. It was something older, something wilder. It was an ancient folk melody, a haunting, melancholic tune that seemed to carry the weight of generations within its simple, powerful chords. The notes flowed from the piano not like a technical exercise, but like cool water over worn stones in a forgotten river. It was a melody that spoke of windswept hills and harvests lost to frost, of resilience forged in hardship and quiet strength passed down from mother to daughter. Where Sloane's performance had been a glittering, untouchable diamond, Lena's was the rich, dark earth from which that diamond was born. It was messy, it was profound, and it was devastatingly, achingly real. It was the sound of endurance. Julian stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape. His anger, so immense only a moment ago, began to drain away, replaced by a stunned, disbelieving awe. He forgot to speak. He forgot to rage. He forgot to breathe. He was lost in the story. The music was telling a story of a legacy not built of gold and silk, but of sacrifice, survival, and the unbreakable continuity of the human spirit. Her playing wasn't about hitting the right notes. It was about bearing a soul. It wasn't a performance. It was a confession. The final chord hung in the air, a long, resonant sigh that seemed to hold all the sorrow and strength of the ages. It faded slowly, leaving behind a silence that was more profound and more powerful than any of the noise that had preceded it. It was a sacred silence. After a long moment, Julian finally found his voice. It was no longer a roar, but a hoarse whisper, rough with an emotion he couldn't name. That melody, he started, then stopped, clearing his throat. He looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time, seeing past the plain dress and the unadorned face. He saw the story from the music reflected in her eyes. He took a slow step closer. His entire demeanor changed. "For you," he asked, his voice now quiet and intensely curious, "what is legacy?" Lena's hands rested gently on the keys. She turned her head to look directly at him, her gaze unwavering. She paused, not for dramatic effect, but as if choosing her words with the same care she had chosen her notes. When she spoke, her voice was calm, yet it resonated through the room with the force of an undeniable truth. "Sir," she began softly, "legacy is not the designer gown we wear to a gala or the weight of a family crest on a golden ring. It's not the flawless education we parade to impress others, nor the list of our ancestors' accomplishments." She rose slowly from the piano bench and stood before him, her presence filling the room in a way Sloane's opulent glamour never could. "True legacy," she continued, her voice gaining a quiet, firm strength, "is the invisible strength in the soul. It is the light that shines through, undeniable, even when one is dressed in rags. It is the grace to withstand ridicule without breaking, and the wisdom to know that your value is not determined by the judgment in another's eyes. Real legacy is when you are at your most vulnerable, stripped of all artifice, and still, your spirit shines through, magnificent and whole." Julian's eyes widened, his face practically glowing with dawning realization. Lena took a small step closer, her gaze intense. "Elysian's campaign is about fragrance, isn't it? A scent can reveal more about a person's true essence than any couturier's creation. For a woman, her perfume is her spirit made tangible. It matters more than her clothes, which change with the seasons. It's more timeless than her jewelry or her hairstyle, which follow the trends. A great fragrance, a true legacy, never fades." "Yes," Julian breathed, the word a reverent exhalation. "Exactly." He stared at her, his mind reeling. Her words hadn't just answered his question. They had nailed the very heart of the campaign, articulating the profound, elusive concept he had been struggling to capture for months. Outside, in the tense waiting room, the other actresses had heard everything. They heard Julian's initial, furious outburst. Then, a shocking, extended silence. Then, the piano. Sloane scoffed, whispering to her small circle of admirers. "What now? A desperate piano trick after she heard my performance? That's just pathetic, and she's not even playing a proper piece." Another actress, more perceptive, frowned. "That melody, it sounds much more complex than it appears. But it won't matter. Her appearance has already sealed her fate." Sloane, who knew her music, felt a fleeting flicker of unease at the raw emotional power echoing from the room, but she quickly brushed it off. "Marianne's little project doesn't get it," she declared with authority. "The piano is an instrument of elegance. Performers bathe, they dress impeccably, they respect the tradition. She's disrespecting the art itself with her slovenly presentation. Julian is going to tear her apart for this stunt." The others nodded, their own confidence reassured by Sloane's certainty. Only Marianne remained silent, her eyes fixed on the door, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Lena hadn't been kicked out yet. That was step one. But her approach was a massive gamble, and Marianne had no idea how it would land. When the music finally stopped, no shouting followed. The silence stretched. 1 minute. 3. 5. It stretched on longer than Sloane's entire audition. What on earth is going on in there? An actress muttered, beginning to pace. He's probably chewing her out so badly he's lost track of time, another theorized. Julian is a top-tier director. He's notoriously brutal. This is going to completely tank Marianne Croft's entire agency. Sloane smiled, leaning back in her chair. The longer the silence, the more thoroughly Lena was being destroyed. It was better than she could have hoped. Inside the room, the silence was no longer tense, but charged with a newfound energy, a current of artistic discovery that crackled between the director and the unknown actress. Julian Thorne, a man who had built a career on his unyielding, critical eye, now looked at Lena Vance as if seeing a masterpiece for the first time. He strode to his desk, snatched Lena's file from his assistant's trembling hands, and scanned the single page of her resume. His eyes widened. "Lena Vance," he read aloud, then looked up, a jolt of recognition hitting him. "Wait, you're the actress who played Cassandra in Legacy of the Dust? That was you?" Legacy of the Dust was an obscure, low-budget art house film that had earned critical acclaim but barely made a ripple at the box office. Lena had played a small but pivotal role as a stoic, morally ambiguous matriarch. "Yes," Lena replied simply. "That was my first film role." Marianne had insisted on sending clips from that performance, so she wasn't entirely shocked he knew the name, but the intensity of his excitement was surprising. "Lena, the moment I saw Cassandra on screen, I was captivated." Julian gushed, his earlier fury now a distant memory. He paced the room, energized. "I told my agent, I need to see that film in theaters. When does it get a wider release?" His regret was palpable. He had almost dismissed, almost destroyed, the very actress whose raw talent had impressed him on screen, all because her everyday appearance was so different from her on-screen persona. Lena offered a small, polite smile. "It's still in post-production, probably another month or so. Thank you for the kind words." "No, you deserve them," Julian insisted, his voice filled with the passion of a true artist who has found his muse. In that film, Cassandra was technically a villain, but her commanding presence, regal, untouchable, radiating a power that had nothing to do with wealth, was the exact and intangible quality he had been searching for. Lena's performance today, both on the piano and in her profound words, had only confirmed it. He was looking at the living embodiment of his vision. "I am so sorry, Lena," he said, his voice thick with genuine remorse as he approached her. "I was blind. I almost sent you away. You were right. Nobility, legacy, it isn't skin deep. It's what's in here." He tapped his chest, right over his heart. He led her to a display case where gleaming bottles of Elysian's most iconic fragrances were arranged like jewels. For 2 centuries, Elysian scents have been crafted with ancient techniques, using the world's finest, rawest ingredients. It's the aroma of true aristocracy, not the manufactured kind. I was honored to direct this campaign, but I was beginning to despair that I would never find someone who could truly embody that spirit. He turned to her, his eyes shining. "Thank God I found you. This collaboration, it will be perfect." His assistant coughed discreetly, whispering, "Sir, the other actresses are still waiting. Should we call in the next one?" Julian waved a dismissive hand without even looking away from Lena. "No need, we have our ambassador. Tell the rest they can go." And, outside, the heavy oak door finally opened. The assistant stepped out, his expression carefully neutral as he addressed the anxious crowd. "Ladies, thank you all for your time and patience. We have now chosen the ambassador for Elysian's legacy campaign. The casting is officially over." He paused, then added, "As a token of Elysian's gratitude, everyone here will be gifted a 3-day luxury cruise. Your managers will receive the details shortly. Enjoy." The room froze. Actresses who hadn't even had their chance to audition gaped in disbelief. "What? They're done? We didn't even get a shot." The announcement stung, but for most of the top names, there was a palpable sigh of relief. They had been spared the humiliation of being rejected by Julian Thorne. Immediately, a swarm of actresses, managers, and assistants descended upon Sloane Covington, their voices a chorus of effusive congratulations. "Well done, Sloane. We knew it was you. And, if it had to be someone, I'm glad it was you. Truly." Sloane stood, basking in the praise like a cat in a sunbeam. This was her due. This was the natural order of things. She approached the assistant, her smile, a dazzling mix of magnanimity and triumph. "Please, extend my sincerest gratitude to Julian. Tell him I won't let him down." The assistant blinked, his professional mask faltering for a second with confusion. "Oh, no, Miss Covington. I'm afraid there has been a mix-up. The role has not been offered to you." The buzz in the room died instantly. Every eye was on Sloane and the assistant. "What?" Sloane's voice was a sharp, brittle thing. The crowd stilled, holding its collective breath. The assistant straightened his tie, his voice firm and clear. "Mr. Thorne has chosen Miss Lena Vance, number 15. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, a disbelieving titter broke the spell. "Lena Vance?" Someone whispered incredulously. "The one dressed like a bum? You're joking, right? This has to be some kind of cruel joke." Sloane's face, which had been glowing with victory, drained of all color. It became a ghastly, pale mask. "There has been a mistake," she said, her voice shaking with a righteous indignation. She had already texted her rival, Piper, bragging about her victory. Losing was not an option. Losing to Lena Vance was unthinkable. "You mean Lena Harper, the nobody?" The assistant's gaze was firm. "There is no mistake. The ambassador is Miss Lena Vance, number 15. "This isn't fair," Sloane's voice rose, cracking under the strain of her shattered ego. "We have been here all day. We are professionals. We deserve an explanation." The assistant sighed, clearly weary of the drama. "The decision is Mr. Thorne's. I cannot change it." "Then let me talk to him," Sloane demanded, taking a step toward the door. Others murmured in agreement, wondering if the assistant had simply botched the announcement. Even Marianne, standing in the back, looked utterly stunned. The assistant, seeing he was about to have a riot on his hands, relented. "Fine, I will pass along your request." He disappeared back into the room for a moment and returned quickly. He addressed Sloane directly, his voice flat. "Miss Covington, Mr. Thorne says, and I quote, 'When you see the Elysian campaign, you will understand why we chose Lena.'" He then turned his gaze past her, to the back of the room. "Miss Croft, Mr. Thorne would like you to come in to discuss the contract details." Marianne, still processing the monumental upset, nodded numbly. "Thank you." She followed the assistant inside, leaving Sloane red-faced and trembling in the center of the room, surrounded by a crowd of her dumbstruck peers. The whisper started again, but this time they were not of ridicule, but of shock and dawning respect. "No way. Lena Vance. We lost to her. I was going to say, she's Marianne Croft's client." Marianne always knew how to spot true talent. We underestimated them. Talk about a dark horse. Sloane must be dying. First, Marianne's old client owned her at every award show. Now, her new girl just snatched the biggest campaign of the year right from under her nose. End of slash. On the ride back downtown in a taxi, the city lights blurring into streaks of neon and gold, Marianne kept glancing at Lena. Her new client was sitting beside her, happily munching on a hot dog she had insisted they buy from a street vendor, her first real meal since she began prepping for the casting call. The more Marianne worked with her, the less predictable she seemed. "You okay?" Lena asked, her mouth half full, catching Marianne's stare. "Feeling lucky to have a genius client like me?" Marianne chuckled, shaking her head in disbelief. "I have to admit, I thought your plan was incredibly risky. Julian is a master. He could have seen through any act. But that piano performance," Marianne pressed. "You played like a master. That takes years of dedicated practice. Your resume didn't mention it." Lena nearly choked on her hot dog, laughing. "Years? Marianne, you're giving me way too much credit. I learned it in a month. And it's the only piece I know. I memorized it by rote. My entire goal was to show off a little bit of soul." Marianne blinked, torn between utter amusement and disbelief. "Seriously? Just that one piece?" "Yep," Lena said, holding up a single finger. "I dabble in a lot of things. Piano, a little guitar, whatever. I pick up just enough to get by, but I'm no expert. If something takes years of grinding to master, I usually just learn the basics and move on to the next interesting thing. Marianne shook her head again, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her face. Lena Vance, you are something else entirely. As the taxi sped through the city's glittering canyons, Lena took another bite of her hot dog, completely unfazed by the day's chaos. She had walked into a room full of wolves, let them tear at her with their words and their judgment, and had still emerged victorious, not because she needed to prove them wrong, but because she knew, with an unshakable certainty, exactly who she was. And in the end, that was more than enough.